Started. Welcome to, depending if you were here for the pre-conference, day 1 or 2, or maybe it's 0 or 1, depending if you are a 0-based person or a 1-based person. It's awesome to be here on the first set of sessions. Today we're going to talk with...
How's it feel to be talking?
It feels wonderful to be talking again. I felt constrained, so I'm very happy. We're going to talk a little about data programming and modeling and how that works in the .NET ecosystem. Mr. Box and myself, we've been working in this space for a while now. And what we want to do is talk a little bit about the stack that we have available as .NET developers to build and work with all this stuff. First, kind of a little bit on the modeling side. Let me start at the bottom of our picture here. We think, you'll notice there's one box that has a new name, I should say. At the very bottom, we have SQL Azure and SQL Server, which probably everyone's familiar with. Great place to store relational data, either on premises or up in the cloud. And then we have a new box here called SQL Server Modeling Services. This formerly was called the Oslo repository. So that's been renamed to the SQL Server Modeling Services. And you'll notice that there are two things on this slide still with quotes, M and Quadrant, which also are part of the Oslo wave of features, which have yet not got a name. We know they won't be these names, but they will eventually have a name. We really view modeling as a way of writing things down, a way of capturing intent, and so we see it as a natural evolution of kind of the data stack. You can think about the features in Entity Framework and kind of the ORM as one approach to modeling. You can think about some of the text-based representations we've been doing with M as another type of modeling, and including the OData work of exposing data across the wire is yet another type of modeling. But instead of kind of waxing poetically about our stack, what we'd like to do is really start at the bottom and start working through the technology and show you a lot of code and work through the bits. So probably the first, the place we want to start here is really with ADO.NET and the Entity Framework. ADO.NET is primarily about working with relational stores. And there's the system data client, the various pieces like SQL client that you know and love, which provide you access to a streaming set of data from a relational store. On top of that, we build a common metadata model, which is, if you're not familiar with the way Entity Framework works, there's a set of classes in the metadata namespace, which give you access to a metadata workspace that lets you bring together all this information about a model so you can reason about it. Don, you're being awfully quiet.
Because you're doing such a good job.
Fabulous.
I have nothing to add.
This is just shocking. On top of this base metadata model, we build the entity client. Now, the entity client is exactly like the SQL client, except it knows about your model that's been described in metadata. And then on top of that, we have the actual object layer, the strongly typed layer on top of all of this called system data objects, which is the base object relational mapping on the top. I tire of this slide. Let's bring up Visual Studio. There's windows everywhere. They're just flying around.
It's like you're running on my laptop.
Yes. Great. So let's open. We have a little bit of a canned project here to start. In C, data talk. Data stuff. Great.
This one?
The solution? Yes, please. That would be the one. So we want to start kind of at the beginning. Who here has ever used the SQL connection class? Anyone? Excellent. Thank you. It's been here since .NET 1. It's a great classic. We love it.
A man or woman cannot get closer to their database than this.
This is it. This is the
assembly of this.
Yes, exactly. So what we see here is, the basics that we all know and love. Create a connection, create a command, put some fabulous SQL. Alas, that will not work here. We'll put some SQL here. We can see using the great features of SQL like the outer apply function. We get a reader, we walk over that reader, and we output some content. Let's run and see how this works really quickly. So we see we have a couple entries in our database. We have, some of our friends and their computers. Jacob's my 9-month-old who he does not yet own his own computer, so he has no computer.
I didn't realize this was actually accurate data.
I think it is accurate data. I tried to make it be.
Yes.
Great. So what we want to do is we want to take this and go from this core, tightly coupled model where we're reasoning exactly about the database, and we want to give ourselves an abstraction on top of this that lets us reason in more computer, more CLR terms instead of DB nulls and things.
So what you're saying is, Chris, that code is strictly tied to the database schema.
Yes, it's like that with the database schema. It is one with the database schema. Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an entity data model. How many people have added an entity data model to their project? Oh, this is awesome. We love you. This is great. This will be quick. We'll make it go fast. So we'll add this. We are going to generate this from the database. There are lots of ways you can start with your model. In ADU.NET 4, there's even more ways of doing it, which we'll talk about. But here we're going to use the one we know and love, which is import from database. We'll give it a name. We'll call it, what are we going to call it?
Model 1.
Fabulous. And we'll go here and pick. Great. One of the new features in ADU.NET 4 is the ability to pluralize and singularize the table names as you do imports. And in addition, we can include foreign keys in the model. In this case, we're going to not include the foreign keys, but we will do the fabulous pluralization. So if you would please, click Next, finish, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah. I'll just leave that.
We'll just
a Microsoft product told me I was doing something wrong, so I'm going to do what it says.
Blindly
That's
obey.
who I am.
Fabulous.
You should
As
do the
we
same
all
too.
should.
We carefully
Great.
craft those dialog boxes.
So now we have the default projection from our database, and we can go in and adjust this.
So there's a one-to-one correspondence between what I see here and what the database schema is.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
But
Let's change that. I don't want a one-to-one correspondence. So what would you like to call people? I know that you hate to call them by their names.
I like to call them monikers.
Monikers, excellent. We'll get a great, and for our computer, we'll change the name here, make it be something interesting that binds the computer to its name.
There,
Great.
how's that? And this memory thing I don't want.
We don't want memory. We don't really care about memory. So let's remove that from the model. So what we can see here is we can introduce some skew now between our model and the database. So let's save that and go to our program.
Now, Chris, what if I like writing that kind of low-level streaming data access against this kind of thing? Can I do that?
Let's see how that works. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this connection, this SQL logic, and we will use the entity connection instead of the SQL connection. So now we'll do the show of hands. How many people have used entity connection class? Ooh, less.
Then this is worth spending a couple minutes on.
Yes. So the way the entity framework works is there is actually a separation between the metadata, the access, and the ORM projection. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use that low-level piece. You don't need a semicolon at the end of your connection string. We're going to use that low-level piece, which is the streaming API on the entity model. So we can go here, the same model, we're going to create a command, we're going to do a text. Instead of doing straight T-SQL, though, we're going to be able to use entity SQL. We're going to be able to type in a program that actually knows about our model, is informed by it. So let's select P, and we'll take p.computers.
Dots?
Dots, we can dot through relationships. Those navigation properties we put in our model are now known to the programming, to the environment here. And we can go from model1.people as P. And so we no longer need a join, we no longer need any of that. We can just use the model to inform the query. And that's going to actually change the T-SQL that gets generated back to the database. The other nice thing about this is we're going to get back structured values in our response. Instead of everything being flattened out, we can actually see the shape of the data in our data access. So what we're going to do is our first record is P, which is the person. And that's going to come back as a iData record, which has kind of all the standard fields you can index by name, etc. And then we're going to go and grab the computers. Now that we have a collection of computers, not just one, we're going to get back an iData reader, which is nested in there, which has all of the computers.
I almost typed star.
Wow, you're really getting to throwback mode.
Switch and talk is
Yeah.
really tough.
Actually, wouldn't it be iData reader star star? You know.
Yes.
Great. So we're going to grab the computers. Cast that to an iData reader. The oneth.
Yep.
Great. And then now what we're going to do is we're just going to iterate over all of the computers in the collection. So we'll say if computers.read, if not computers.read, sorry, if we have no computers, then we'll output the has no computer. Otherwise, we will else we'll just do a for each or sorry, not a for each, but rather a do while loop inside of there.
Keep talking while I type.
Okay, great. I'll keep doing that. So what you can see here is we're actually doing first off, we're doing streaming. So we're not having to allocate all the values up front. Secondly, we're not instantiating all the CLR strongly typed classes. So you can really see that there is a way of programming the entity framework that doesn't necessarily use all of the services. One of the things about EF is that it's a very factored framework. You can kind of choose what levels of the framework you want to buy in on. So here we're going to... The wrong reader. We are getting code review feedback on the fly.
Awesome.
Fabulous. It's the Mechanical Turk
Are you okay
syntax
now?
highlighting.
Thank you so much.
Great. Let's
Richard,
F5.
free t-shirt? Free t-shirt? Great. Let's see if it works.
Fabulous. Okay, we got at least that far. So we're going to open the connection. We're creating the command. We're going to generate our command text. We go get the reader. We start outputting. Yes. Okay, let's just let it run to the end. I'm excited. Excellent.
Woohoo!
Yes. Wow, that was, yeah. Pitiful, pitiful. Okay, so now let's write the next actually the most common way of programming the entity framework, which is when we added the model, by default, we got all of this code generation occurring. So we actually can do the classic ORM style, let's go program the classes. So let's just do a using of the var connection equals a new model1.
No constructor is needed, correct?
Yes, correct. That's going to bind to our connection. And then we can for each over all the people. And we can see we get our happy and friendly dots in IntelliSense. And so now we will not make mistakes like reading the wrong reader. Great. We can check the count. Lovely. And we'll right line that it has no computer. Excellent. We're typing feverishly.
Oh, and notice my local projection of the schema shows up.
Of course. And then otherwise we'll else just let's for each and dump out the computers. So you'll notice, well actually let's pause for a moment, let you finish typing, catch up. Does anyone see a missing line of code here? Anyone familiar with the entity framework? No? Object context, what? The object context is model 1, so we've created that. But there's one thing that you had to do before. Yes, we have to load. So let's run. Let's see what this does. Great, run to the end, and we'll see we get the second set of things. In any framework 4.0, we have, not only do we have lazy loading of collections, so automatic walking of the elements, it's on by default, so all the auto-generated code, you don't have to call include or load or any of those other methods. It just automatically populates.
And Chris, if it turns out I don't want that local remote transparency, that I want some protection to make sure I don't just dot through the entire database and bring it into my virtual
For you,
memory?
Don, we can turn all that off.
We can turn that off.
Oh, yes, of course.
Awesome. Great.
Fabulous. Great.
That was great, Chris. And that was awesome for taking an existing database and writing some code against it.
So the other piece of feedback we've actually often got is, you know, boy, you Microsoft guys are great. You always seem to have magically the database already existing that you need for every one of your talks. Unfortunately, that's not the state I am in. I often actually need to create a database. There is not while Dallas is going to deliver all the world's data to us, I don't think it yet knows all of my internal structures I need. So we have another way we can go build this. Let's go create a new model. And this time, instead of starting with an existing database, let's define a wholly new database. Now, we can do this in a couple different ways. What we're going to do here is we're going to start with a model. We're going to say, I love the entity model so much, that's the thing I want to define my truth. And I'm going to define my truth in the form of an EDMX. So great, create a database. And here we're going to choose an empty model. And now we can right-click on the surface. We can add a new entity. And here we can give it a talks. And we talked about pluralization as a fun little thing. So we see, can you do a little window plus so we get bigger fonts? Great. Minimize that window, please. Get conveniently in a bad spot. So we see hotel and hotels. Don, if you could you type a goose? Let's create a goose table. Okay, so that's geese. Now, let's do the really tricky one, sheep. Sheep is both a singular and plural, so it goes in. So let's now model, given that we're all having fun, let's model hotels and parties, because we all know all the good parties happen in hotels.
It's that time.
So create the hotel table, and let's create a party table. Great. Add that. And now let's add some fields here to the hotel. What hotels have names, they have how cool they are. Great. And then let's add something to the party of who's hosting it. That's always important to know. And now let's add a relationship between those two so they know about each other. Add association. And we know that really good parties can actually span multiple hotels. So we're going to make this be a many-to-many relationship. That's how good our parties are going to be this PDC.
Sweet.
So, okay, and now let's go build a database. So I assume at this point we take a screenshot of this and email it to a DBA.
Dude, that's so awesome. Hold on.
Great. I think we can do better than pixels, so let's right-click on the
I have
canvas.
the all print screen image taken.
Yeah, that's so far. Right-click on the desktop or on the base, and what we'll say here is generate database from model. So what this is going to do is it's going to give us a database that we're going to go look at. We're going to say we want to create a new database. So we'll put it on our local server. We'll give it a name. Shishi party time. Sweet. We'll click OK. At this point, it will say, hey, there's no database. You want me to generate a database for you? We'll say yes. All that's done is allocate the SQL Server database. Hasn't done anything else. There are no tables in it. We haven't modified it. That's just a way that we can, when we hit the next button, where it can go to look at the database to go get some information to run against, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So can you window plus in this as well? And what we can see here is this is generating all the tables we need. And in fact, you can see that down here at the bottom, we have the many-to-many join table that got generated. So all this is just a plain SQL script, which if we hit finish,
Say yes.
What that did is it told us that we want to replace the model's store definition with what we just generated. So now let's right-click on this and choose execute. And we could take this script, of course, we could hand it to a DBA, we could tweak the SQL, we could go customize the way indexes will be created, we can do whatever you love to do with your SQL. But here we hit it completed successfully. Let's go to Server Explorer and open up the new.
Why isn't it showing up here?
It should be at the bottom.
No, I don't see it.
Chi-Chi party time. Don't you have it at the top there?
Oh, it's at the top. I'm looking for alphabet things.
You're looking for one that mysteriously knows the one you want and puts it at the top of the list?
You guys try doing this job. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. It looks
There's
easy.
pressure. There's
easy.
people
You
watching
gotta
every
know.
move you make. No, please cancel here. Let's do this. Let's no, cancel.
Why
cancel.
not do
cancel.
that?
Go to the top. Go to data. No, very top. The menu thing at the top of the screen.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
It's right there. Go transact SQL editor. New query connection. We'll go against dot. And now here we can say use Chi-Chi party time. Great. So you'll notice here, right inside Visual Studio, we have all the SQL tools, statement completing, text editor. Great. And hit Control-Shift-E.
I did.
And we have no data. Woo! But we have structure. Great. Do we want to insert something, or should we go and do the next type of construction?
Whatever you want. Great.
Well, we're in like 19 minutes into the talk. They're getting bored, I can tell.
All right, great.
So
Maybe they don't like seeing SQL?
they don't like seeing SQL.
Okay, I'll get that offensive text out of there.
So we've seen. I went and built a database. The database is my truth. I went and I used the import wizard. I got my EDMX. This is the way we've all been using the stuff to date. We saw, actually, I love EDMX so much. It is the center of my universe, and I want it to be my truth. We've also heard from people, and I should caveat this. Next part is a feature CTP. This is not right now. This is not in the .NET 4 release. But what it is we have to create a new project for this one.
I just did.
You did. You're so fast. So let's go add references. And we'll add those CTP bits. There's a set of people who believe The code is the truth. They want the CLR class definition to be how they define their model. They want that to be the basis of their world. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these CTP bits. We're going to click OK. And we're now going to define a new database.
And that CTP is available on the web, but it's not in Dev 10 Beta 2.
Yes, it's available on the web. You can go to the internet to msdn.com/data, I think it is, and they're just sitting there waiting for you to click on. Great, so let's define a class. We're going to define a restaurant. Yeah. Don always has opinions about where a good place is to eat. So we're going to define an ID here. We're going to define the name of the restaurant, and then we're going to define a list of menu items. Or we're going to define menu item first. Great. Those have an ID. And then we'll define the name of the menu item, let's say, and then whether or not it's delicious. Is it fabulous? Is it so succulent that we must go get it? Great. So we've defined, we need to do one last thing, which is the set else operator. We'll go up to the restaurant and we will add a list of menu items. It's okay, Tom.
I love doing talks with you. It's so much fun.
Great. And please initialize that collection. Now, one of the things we've also heard a lot of feedback from people is when I define my classes, please do not make me derive from some common base class. Please do not make me implement 1,000 interfaces. Please let me just write a persistence ignorant class. That would be just fabulous. So we've done that. So here we have our menu item. We have our food. We've initialized it. We're ready to party.
In fact, Chris, I could have written this code before I did the add references.
You could have absolutely written this code. I believe list is defined in the framework, and the rest are all primitives.
Yes.
Great. Now that we've defined our model, we have our model done. We have defined the shape of our universe. The next thing we want to do is go define our data access layer, because it turns out we do want to go program against this. So we are now going to introduce our first piece of code that's going to bring in the entity framework. So we're going to do my provider-specific DAO. It's going to be derived from object context. We're going to add a reference now to that project. And what we're going to do is we're going to go create a constructor on it, please. You'll remember before we talked about entity connection as that low-level piece of machinery for how the entity framework talks to the database. So we're going to have it, this is going to take an argument of the entity connection, and it's going to pass that on to its base. And now all we need to do is to define the shape of the values we want available in our data access layer. So we're going to create a iObject set of restaurants. Another feature we heard people talk a lot about is they wanted an ability to have an abstraction for things like the collections of objects that wasn't so coupled to the framework. And so we've defined iObject set, which is really just iQueryable plus create, update, and delete, which means that we no longer have to have object queries floating around everywhere as our surface syntax. Great, our food, and we'll create the object set of that. I believe we now have a fully functional system. So we've defined our data access layer, we've defined our models, let's go build a database. So now inside of our constructor, please, if we could say, let's create a context builder.
Wait, Chris, there's no XML, right?
There's no XML.
Yeah.
No angle brackets were hurt in the construction of this database. So we're going to create a builder, which what this is going to do is it's going to build up that metadata workspace. We talked about the metadata layer, the entity connection layer, and the object services. And so we're going to plug in at that metadata layer, and we're going to use this class, which comes from the CTP, which is going to go look at the C# class definitions and use that to define the model. Great. So we have our builder. We're going to pass it. What? Sorry?
Yeah, sorry.
And then we need to pass it a connection of where we want it to look. No, sorry. You're typing the wrong code, Mr. Box.
I'm
made
typing
a
the wrong
horrible
code?
mistake. Horrible mistake. Please, no, go back. Go new build var builder equals new object context. There are two APIs on context builder. One does the kind of immediate construction, and then you get back a real context, which was the one Don was calling, which was the .create method. The other one creates me a builder, which will let us do some very interesting things in a moment with this. And so now we'll say using connection, using var connection equals builder.create. Great. And here we will pass a SQL connection, please.
Thank you.
So new SQL connection, it will point it at the server's dot. We use integrated security in our fabulous demo. So again, the initial line, that did the reflection to go cons up the metadata workspace. And then what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go build and connect to the actual database here. So integrated security equals true, and give the database any name you'd like. Equals great. Thank you for your creativity. And now inside of that using blocks, let's just say if, and now here's the fun part, we can say con dot, or actually if not.
Oh, yes.
If not, connection.database exists. Connection.createDatabase. And now, great, let's say connection.joints.add. And we can go in here and add some joints. So let's just add a real quick restaurant. Name equals, what's your favorite place? Of course, Tito's Tacos. And the food is equal to, and here we can do great, and we'll just say, what kind of food would you like to talk about? Let's make it. You're
missing a print on your user.
Thank you.
Great. Continue to get the fabulous thing. Great.
No, not great. It's important, they know.
Oh, that's right. That's right. This is actually the educational portion. Sorry. The rest has been just a way to entertain you while Don tells you that he doesn't like the burritos at Tito's Tacos. Anybody eaten at Tito's Tacos?
Culver City, you got to go there. Every PDC, I get off the plane, I go to Tito's.
Wow, that's a small audience, so you are
great.
not winning. Great. That looks wonderful. Let's run that.
Do I need to maybe do a...
How about let's save changes? I've heard the database actually likes you to commit these things.
Great.
So let's run. Can you pull up Quadrant while we're running?
Yeah.
And then did the run
reports?
succeed? Oh, you haven't yet stepped through it.
That'd be a yes.
Great. Fabulous.
Oh, hold on. How about if I run in the right project?
Oh, hey, look at that. Let's try that again. Let's run. Now, I predict
It won't work.
we'll have a failure.
Yeah, you know why?
I do know why. Let it run. Let it run. Let them see the error. I want people to, this is the opportunity. Keep going. Save changes. And we're going to see a crash.
Yes.
Let's go look at the inner exception. Now, violation of primary key constraint. Can you zoom in? The people in the back can't read that. We are violating the primary key. And the reason is because we didn't set it. We wanted this persistent ignorant class. We didn't define a model. We didn't give any hints. We didn't go play with all that. So we need a way to go define that. Now, I don't want to go infect my model with all of that stuff. What instead I want to do is configure the connection. So if you will please, after the builder,
Yes.
right there, please say, we're going to use the Fluent API that is part of the builder API, and we're going to go add metadata information. So please say builder dot.
Chris, I'm getting all kinds of red squigglies. Oh, hang on.
That's your Oslo heritage. Using. Great. So if you could please, let's say builder dot, and what we're going to do is we're going to get the entity for restaurant, get the property, dot property of, and we're going to say r arrow r dot ID. We're going to go get the ID property, and now we can say dot is identity. And so here we can configure every aspect of our metadata workspace. We can go set keys, we can go set constraints like max length, we can do all of this with a fairly simple Fluent API.
But there are angle brackets now.
No more angle brackets.
No, right there.
Oh. But generic angle brackets are the good kind.
Now we created the database, didn't we?
We did. So just actually just put a, change that bit to be if database exists, delete database.
Are you serious?
Yeah, if database exists, delete it.
Dude, I can't do that.
Really?
Yeah, it really bothers me. Because people are going to go type this code at home, and they're going to...
Wow. Okay.
Now, I can now hear it. Entity framework, now delete your databases. Right? Don't use it.
Wait, there's an interjected question.
Can I use the key attributes in the class
Can I use the key attributes in the class?
for make this?
You can definitely use the key attribute in the class. I don't.
System.model.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know the attribute. I love the attribute.
Sean, are you in the room? What's the answer?
So the answer is not in this CCP, but eventually you will be able to. There is something else you can do in the meantime, though, which is you can write an entity configuration class, which specifies those things sort of separately in one self-contained unit, and those will get picked up by the.
Okay. The answer is not yet,
But yes, eventually.
but soon. And there's a really complex class you can do right now that lets you put this all together. If you'd like the name of that complex class, Sean can give that to you later. It's a nice long name.
So I made our database.
We have our database. We have our keys. If you could, this is the tool Quadrant, which was that still to be named tool that was part of the Oslo Wave. We're going to go connect to our database, which is called NEDB. And please click create. And then let's go expand this out. Can you zoom in a little bit? Control mouse wheel just a tiny bit. Other direction. It'd be awesome. Whoa! Okay.
I've never used a mouse. I use my damn laptop. I got the nipple. I don't use the mouse. Where's the damn... Here, just zoom to... Jeez.
Okay, that's
that
great.
okay?
That's great.
Can you
That's
do that?
great. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. Right there. Can you drag out joints? Great. We can see our restaurant here. Now, can you drag out Tito Tacos? Oh, that's great. Tree master detail. That's great. Select the Tito's Tacos, and we see if we expand this, we can drill through. We can see the food. We can see our burritos, and our burritos delicious? No. Fabulous.
Yes.
All right. So we've now seen, go back to slides real quick. So we've seen 3 ways to go build our system. One of the things that people said is they said, oh my God, you're going to the PDC and you're going to show people 3 completely different ways of building this stuff. They will lynch you after your talk unless you give them some advice about how to put these things together and not go insane. And so really what we do is we think about this in terms of how you model the truth. What is the thing that you as a developer believe is the master copy of your data? And so really we kind of see 3 people doing it one of 3 ways. They start with a database, and they care deeply and passionately about the exact shape of that database. For those people, we believe you start with the database, do the import wizard, and then do modifications on top of that. They're the people who believe the model is the truth. They're going to go and they want to build the entity model, they want to do that, and the database can largely be projected out of that, or you can inject some SKU if you want. And then finally, the people who the database is largely an implementation detail. I'm going to go define some CLR classes, and I just want you, please go store these somehow in a database. I really don't care. And we still give you control in all these environments, but there's really kind of what's the center of your being. Are you a code being, a model being, or a database being? Is that reasonable?
Sounds great.
Great. Fabulous.
Awesome.
I noticed you stepped up from the keyboard.
Because I just can't code for you anymore.
I can tell that.
You're a harsh taskmaster. So, takeaway, Entity Framework, that's where we're going. If you're a C# developer on our platform, Entity Framework's where we're putting so much investment. You can see we did a lot of work since the last release. We've got a whole long list of stuff we're going to do in the next release. So what I want to do is kind of change gears. It turns out, if you think about the world of data access, it's lovely to have a great way to communicate with your database, because your database is an important part of your app. And the better that we can improve the relations between you and your database, the better of a job our whole team is doing. That's our goal. But it turns out that a lot of the data in the world is not in your database. Right? A lot of the data in the world you want to go interact with in the world is stored somewhere else. It's stored in somebody's application. It's stored maybe in a file system, maybe in an XML document. It might be in a website or a web service. So you may have heard at the keynote, we're spending a lot of time at the company doing effectively protocol-based integration for data. So how many people have done ADO.NET data services? A few people. So if you think about it, when the team launched it, we had this name called Astoria. And it was terrible because no one knew whether Astoria was the name of the project, the name of the team, the name of the bits, or the name of the protocol.
And
so
you
this,
do air quotes all the time.
and you always have to do air quotes because there's lawyers in the room. So what we've done is we've given a name to the protocol, right? And the protocol really, if you think about all the stuff we did in ADO.NET Data Services, the fact that we wrote code is awesome, can't have anything without code. But the fact that we actually built a protocol that we were able to get people to implement and consume with or without using our bits was actually kind of the interesting thing to observe there. So we now have a name for our protocol. It is called the OData protocol, right? OData is just the name of our open data protocol for doing REST-based access of data, whether that data is stored in a database, a website, a web service, wherever it might be. And we've done a lot of work getting people to implement this protocol and being able to build clients to consume it. So what we want to do is talk about how to use that protocol if you're a .NET Framework developer. I'm assuming most people in this room, because the talk said for .NET developers, I'm assuming most of you guys write .NET code and you're not SharePoint jockeys. But not that there's anything wrong with that. Some of my best friends are SharePoint jockeys. Right, they're the surface dwellers while we are down here below. So don't get your priorities mixed up. There's something going on there. Nonetheless, let's go see.
Go dig deeper.
Yeah,
Keep
I'm going to
going.
just stop. And Chris,
Great. How
let's
about we just write some code?
Let's just write some code.
Okay, great.
So I have my SharePoint appliance. Lenovo makes a SharePoint appliance. It's called a laptop. And so what we're going to do is go look at our SharePoint service. So can you just use the internet?
The internet. Ooh.
And so what we're going to do is surf to a SharePoint site that I set up last night, actually. So we're having issues because I configured this machine back when we were at home at Microsoft. And so all of our naming stuff doesn't work, so we have to use IP addresses. That's just because the local network is kind of hard for us to use. So we've got a simple SharePoint site here, PDC Data Talk site. Can you go there?
Yes.
And if you look under lists, you'll see we've got a couple of lists which I created. I basically allocated some schemas inside this SharePoint, made the list, blah, blah, blah. It all works. And there's stuff in there. Awesome. I want that data. That data has value that I want to integrate into my application. So let's talk about how we do this. When I installed SharePoint on this box, I put on the ADO.NET Data Services CTP, 1.5 CTP, whatever it is. And so now we should be able to hit this thing and see OData protocol stuff come out. So to start that, why don't we go to whack data talk, whack underbar, we know where to go.
I do. Let me minimize this. Great.
So we're going to go to our site name, which is data talk, and we're going to add underbar VTI bin. I'll bet many of you never thought you'd see that thing again. Listdata.svc. And what this thing is going to give us is an Atom Pub service document. So we've enabled SharePoint to speak the protocol. And you'll notice that we've got a handful of things there, but including the thing we care about, which is expense reports and expense items. So that application now is exposing data that I can get to using standard REST-based protocols, using standard off-the-shelf components. If I hit the actual feed, which I was able to extract out of the service document by just taking one of those collection names, like expense reports, and sticking it on the end of the URL. Sweet. Now you see a standard Atom feed. And if we scroll down, we'll see some of the information in there being surfaced up. You'll just see it's XML. Nobody wants to look at XML. I've learned. Awesome. Great.
We'll go this way no one can read it.
Perfect.
Great.
One of the other things we've done, so this is just pure vanilla Atom, but so that tools, so that a variety of tools can get more information, one of the things we do in OData is we add an optional component where if you want to tell us what the schema of your site looks like so we can get more metadata up front, we let you do that by adding $metadata to the root URL. And what do we see here? What we see here is an EDMX file that contains CSDL. This is the same format that we were using in Visual Studio when we were creating our EDM models, our Entity Framework models. So both Entity Framework and this protocol uses the same format, which allows us to have a common way to write down schema. Sweet. I'd like to go see it do something other than, no one's going to go actually look at this in a browser, so let's go do something.
Great.
So why don't we, what do you want to do, write a program or use Excel? Demoer's choice.
Oh, let's start with Excel.
Great.
I love Excel.
So in addition to teaching SharePoint how to speak our protocol, we've taught Excel how to speak our protocol. So what we're going to do is go to Power Pivot, which is installed on this box. We're going to go look for from data feed. And we're going to type our URL to the service document right there. Hit next. And what that did was it did the $metadata query. It basically did the sniffing of the server to see what we could go do. And we're going to select which collections we actually want to surface. So we'll take expense reports, which is good enough for what we're going to do. Awesome. It's going to go off and grab the data. Happens instantaneously normally. All right, great, awesome. And there's all the data that we had trapped in our application. It's now surfaced to kind of an IW-friendly tool. Let's look at another IW-friendly tool, because we'll go do some more stuff with this later. My favorite IW-friendly tool is Visual Studio. So I've got a project with the references already set up if you want to use it. Sweet. So let's go write an application against that SharePoint site. So what we're going to do is do add service reference. Add service reference, we're going to give it the same URL that we gave Excel. We'll go sniff the metadata. We found some.
Smells
awesome.
like OData.
Great. So we go ahead and say OK. We didn't give it an interesting name, so it'll be service reference 1, which is fine.
Apparently.
Here we go. And so what we're going to do is say var con, or whatever we call it, var model equals, I can't read it from here, service reference 1 dot the very bottom one, which is PDC talk site data context. And we need to give it the URL that we're going to actually talk to. Great. So new URI, the same URI we've been using throughout this app. Great. And now, because SharePoint's a secure application, we need to give it some credentials. So we're going to go ahead and say model.credentials equals new network credential. And we've got our username and password stored in another source file, so we don't have to type it in front of you in source code. So Chris is going to go to constants.username and constants.password. Yeah,
They were all getting ready there.
Yeah, they were all ready. Yeah, I can see the Twitter feeds already. Hacked Don and Chris's SharePoint site. Cool. And now so what we'll do is we'll do a for each var report in model.expense reports. Sweet. And we'll just do a little bit of output.
What is it? What would you call justification?
Justification. Or justification is awesome. Great. That's
Great.
good enough. I'm low tech here. And then, oh, look at you. Great. Let's go see what it does. And notice we often got all the justifications for our expense reports. Make sense? Some of those make me a little concerned, Chris. Can we go off and nuke a few of them?
Great. Yeah, let's do that.
So I actually want you to do it before you do the printing of it. In fact, I'll go back to SharePoint. Show them that there's boondoggles in there.
Okay.
Oh, they could see it in the XML. I don't know why you're going to this.
Great.
Great.
The auto show, the boat show.
Star Trek premiere. Awesome.
Wow, if you filed that expense pretty late, 'cause I think Star Trek was out a while ago. So.
This is Star Trek 2. Dude, we're in LA.
I thought you were covering
we're
it
in
the
LA,
fact that you went
man.
to the new moon premiere, and so you were.
That Rob Pattinson is so dreamy, isn't he? Great.
Okay, so let's go through these, and we'll just delete all the ones we don't like, right?
Let's do the boondoggle one. So
Yeah.
let's do a query. So var query equals from report in model.expense reports where r.justification equal boondoggle.
Is that how you spelled it?
Yes, that's how I spell it. Select
Great.
R. Awesome. So we have a query that's going to go off and do this. And now we'll do a var b in boons to array.
Great.
And now we will do a model.delete object. And so remember, the protocol not only supports data retrieval and query, but we also have the ability to go do updates using the standard Atom Pub protocol, which is our standard REST-y way to do this stuff. Cool. So now when I run this app, it might fail, might succeed. Something's going to happen, but it's going to be awesome. Then I go back to SharePoint. Hit F5. They're all gone. Sweet. Thank you, Chris. Awesome. I love that. Sure. Give it up for Chris Anderson. There's only one of him. Precious resource on this planet. Awesome. Dude. Okay, one last thing. I want to go write my stuff to go participate in this OData thing. So we saw SharePoint on the server side. We saw Excel on the client side and Visual Studio on the client side. Now let's go write our server so we can kind of have the combinatorics going. So we've got a server already set up. We got a plain old ASP.NET app. What we're going to do is go to web, and at the very bottom of the list, you're going to see ADO.NET data service. Now before you hit OK, this is the last demonstration of an ADO.NET data service ever to happen in the world. Stay tuned. Go to the keynote tomorrow.
Processor?
The code you will write will be exactly the same. We'll just call it something different.
Great. Okay.
Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a feed. We're going to expose some data. So Chris and I, one of our old hackneyed demos is we like to go look at the process table and do stuff with it. This is the Anders demo. Actually, we got it from him. He hackneyed it for us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say process info is going to have an ID, which is the process ID. It's going to have a name, which is the name of the process. And it's going to have a working set. And getting set. Sweet, and because this is going to be an entity type, we need to put an attribute on it to make the ID a key. So there's a class level attribute called data service key, and we'll just say give it the string name ID. Sweet. So I've got a schema, which I wrote in code, right? And now what we're going to do is we're going to write our model class. So public class process model. It doesn't have to derive from anything. No, it doesn't. But it does need to have a property. It has to have properties of type iQueryable of T. So iQueryable of, in our case, process info, and we only need to give it a name, processes, and it needs to have a getter. And inside this getter, it's actually pretty easy to write. What we're going to do is construct the link query to actually go do the work. So we're going to use system.diagnostics.process, so processes, process, thank you, process.getProcesses. So this will give me all the processes running on my box, and I'm going to do a select new process info. So I'm going to take the broad OM I get from the diagnostic system and narrow it down to this little schema and surface it that way. Great. And so I'll just construct one of these things. We'll give it the name. We'll give it the process ID. And for the working set, because I don't know how to tell you this, processes, they got a lot of memory in them. So we can actually make some sense out of the numbers. We're going to scale it down into megabytes. Right? So Chris is going to do a little bit of computer math there. And I'm not going to ding him for not doing the arithmetic shift because he's already proven his prowess writing ASM today. And notice at the very end, we do an as queryable. So I just write a plain old IEnumerable based expression, and then I wrap it in iQueryable so that the runtime of our system can go do machinery on the query results. Great. So I've now taken my process server class, which was the thing that was generated by the wizard. I put my type name in there. And now what we need to do is we need to tell the system which of our properties we want to expose and what kind of access we want. Read only, read write, what have you. So we're going to say all of the properties we have on there are going to be read only. Sweet. That looks like it's going to maybe work. I don't know. Let's try it, Chris. Why don't we set the startup project to be the server? Beautiful. What's going to happen? And if I go to process_server.service, there we go. We have the same protocol we got served out of SharePoint. We have one collection which is called processes. And if I look here and scroll down, you'll see I've got WinLogon running. I don't need that. It's useless. Service host, that's probably garbage. Who cares about it? And away we go. What's really cool about this is because we have this protocol-based ecosystem, we have lots of clients and lots of servers that go talk this stuff. We can now go into Excel to go do analysis on our process table. So why don't we go ahead and do that? We'll go add another pivot. And we'll give it the URL from our server. Is that the one you just pasted in?
Yep.
Sweet. So there were a lot of processes there. Oh, what did you do?
There's a lot there.
Yeah, okay, great. I was confused by what I saw. Because they looked like expense reports.
No.
Awesome.
Let's filter this down really quick. There's too many in there.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a query here for the processes table, and I'm going to add a dollar filter, and we're going to say
equals working set.
Working set.
GT.
Greater than
So we only want to
50.
find the process hogs. Can you do a Windows plus?
Oh, whoops. Yeah.
So notice that we're taking our existing URI, which is our query effectively, or our resource identifier, however you want to think of it. And we're going to add a modifier which says, please run this predicate before returning me the values. So now instead of getting back 85 or whatever we got back, we're only going to get back 11. And there is the stuff we got, and you'll notice some interesting apps up there. At least the ones we work on aren't the biggest. Go quadrant. So what we're going to do is go find our data. And notice now I can see what the who's consuming a lot of memory, who's getting maximum utilization out of our machine, and who's not doing so well. I can see it as a pie. You get the point.
Yeah.
Great.
Turns out we've all used Excel.
Yeah.
Great.
Sweet. Yes, we have. Great. Cool. Awesome. Slides.
Slides.
So we have a protocol. It is effectively our new ODBC, right? With ODBC, we try to get lots of people to implement ODBC drivers, and then we got lots of people to implement ODBC clients, and a lot of people did a lot of stuff with it, right? We did OLEDB. It didn't work out so well, right? Now we're doing OData.
Right? So this is kind of the way this is our technology for exposing data, consuming data, live the dream. One last thing before we stop. Please. Since this talk is about data and modeling, we certainly saw a model, right? When we did the dollar metadata, we saw an EDM model. When we were doing all that editing in the design surface inside of Entity Framework tooling, we saw a model. There's another modeling technology I'd like to quickly mention, which is this thing called M. M is a language for data, right? It was designed to be a language for data from day one. We use it to specify all kinds of things in the data regime. We use it to specify values, to specify schemas, to specify queries, functions, transformations, pattern matching, all kinds of stuff we do with that language, right? What we're doing with M is, if you went to PDC last year, you knew we had a backend that spit out T-SQL so that I could use M to go design a database and to actually query a database. We didn't have time to show you, but when we were in Quadrant, all of those Quadrant windows were backed by an M query. And I can actually go into Quadrant and type arbitrary M expressions to go query the database and get a fairly link-esque experience, including language services. We also use M to generate grammar specifications, right? That is the ability to write a text format and write how to project an arbitrary piece of text into a piece of structured data that I can then do further query and analysis transformation on. One thing we're doing this year, which is new, is we're bringing M and EDM together. We're making it so that I can write, instead of those XML angle brackety files that I was editing in Visual Studio with the designer. And by the way, how many people never, ever, ever have to go into the XML file under a designer? Yeah, that's what I thought. Great. We hear you. So we've been doing work to make it so that we can use M actually as a way to write an EDM model so that I don't have to use the designer unless I want to. Designers are good sometimes, and sometimes they're not so good. So we want to have a friendly textual syntax for going to do this work. So why don't we go ahead and demonstrate that. So what Chris is going to do is he's going to go to Visual Studio. He's going to go to, you want to go to the last one we did?
Yep.
So he's going to go to that Shishi Party one or something, or do Model 1. Do Model 1. Remember Model 1? This is the one we inferred from the database. Right now I made some changes. Cool. So what Chris is going to do is show some bits which are not available. So we basically went into the labs and pulled out some Visual Studio integration, which isn't ready for it isn't ready for anybody to go touch except a small number of people. But it does use some stuff that is shipping, which we'll see as soon as we use this. So what we're about to do, you can't do at home. Everything else you can do. So what Chris is going to do is he's going to go to the
system's
designer.
Become unstable.
Pardon me?
Never mind. It said it's going to become unstable. I'm going to rename. Yes. Great.
So Chris just renamed model1.edmx to model1.m and hit save. And now we can go off and edit our model. Do you want to change something or not?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
we'll make it
moniker 2, look at you.
Okay.
Awesome. So he's making changes to our model. And now what we can do is go look at that thing, and instead of seeing XML, we'll wait a little while, and we'll see M. Make sense?
And so now I have a normal language that was ergonomically designed for people, not computers, that I can actually go in and edit. And I can just start here. Right? By the time we're done, you'll be able to say new M file, go write some models, and just go use it. You don't have to use the designer unless you want to. But you can see we're not only doing the low-level plumbing integration, which this stuff will actually work. The bits you've got, you can edit M inside of Visual Studio, and you can actually use M to build an EDM model in Visual Studio. We just haven't done the designer integration, which is the piece we just showed you. That piece is not ready yet, but it will be. Great, and so now I've got a normal language. I've got syntax highlighting, color coding, IntelliSense. Can you go add a new field or something somewhere?
Sure. Let's make computers have a new field.
Great.
Computers need fish.
Great. Don't you want to show off that we have completions or something? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. We'll say where.
Give it a unique fish.
Oh, yeah, great.
Comma unique fish. Yeah, that's not so. Yeah, there you go. Great.
There we go.
Awesome. Sweet. Great. Bet we have another slide. Bet we have another slide. Sweet. So, entity framework. You're a C++. Yeah, I gotta get rid of that. If you're a C++ developer, oh, we got some really great stuff to show you later on. If you're a C#, VB, F#, .NET developer, entity framework is where we're going. We're there. Get on board. It's time. If you want to access data that's not in a relational store or expose data that's not in a relational store and kind of play in this bigger ecosystem of apps that are kind of more fluid and dynamic and can discover data on the fly, we have this thing called OData. It's for you. M, it's a language for doing data. We're doing all kinds of stuff with it, as you can see. If you come to we have a bunch of other talks, right? We only had an hour to go do this. I would highly recommend you go to our website, which is msdn.com/data. I would highly suggest you go to see the shock and awe talk, which is being given by Sham and Chris Ann. They're going to just show you everything in the entity framework that's new. It's actually a really fun talk. My friend Henrik Freistig-Nielsen is going to give a talk on REST and OData from WCF. That's tomorrow. The one and only Doug Purdy and the one and only Chris Sells are going to give the Quadrant and M talk sometime tomorrow. Pinky and I are going to go do a talk on M. If you go to no other talks in the world, go to Pablo's deep dive on OData, which is actually a chalk talk. It's over in the VS.net and .NET Lounge Thursday at 9:30 a.m. He's going to just drill in. It's the low-level grunge of the protocol. And then finally, my favorite talk is James Baker and Shosh are going to give a talk on SQL Server modeling services, which now has a name.
It's
Yahoo.
So happy.
Great.
Great.
So,
we have 2 minutes and 45 seconds for questions. Any questions? What about XAML integration with M? That's a good question. XAML's a great way to write stuff down. I could definitely imagine serializing instances. Right now, we have yet to do any deep integration with that. Although what we have done is we've done a ton of changes in the entity framework to make data binding to both WPF and ASP.NET work much better.
What's the difference between OData and AtomPub?
what's the difference between OData and AtomPub? OData takes AtomPub and says, yay-hoo, this works, it's awesome, you can do that. We've added a few things which are optional, that if you want to opt into some of the more schema discovery scenarios, you can do it. If you want to augment the URIs to do some of the filtering like we did it. OData is really just a couple of extensions which you can either do or not do.
OData.
And we also have a JSON representation of the protocol, so we can do it from the browser. So in the keynote, we wrote an OData client purely in JavaScript, which meant we used JSON back and forth on the wire.
Great. Another question in the back there?
Actually, not a question so much, but what Don said in the last PDC, you've been successful in introducing a new data protocol every PDC, and this is no different, so that's great.
Yes, yes, no new data access, no new data access protocol.
He claimed, no, we renamed one we introduced last year, so it doesn't count.
Oh, we're going to rename them every year.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Great.
Great, thank you very
I think that's a good time
much.
to stop.